Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Daddy, is Mummy feeling cold inside there?
No, sweetheart, Mummy can't feel cold
Will
anymore.
Mummy come home?
Mummy's love will always be with us.
No, it can't be. Elena. Elena, wait! Sir, you need a boarding pass. That's my wife. I buried her 3 years ago.
What would you do if the person you buried 3 years ago suddenly appeared in front of you, alive and walking away with someone else? Watch until the end, because the truth behind Elena's disappearance will change everything. 3 years ago, I buried my wife. At least, I believed I did. I stood beside a closed coffin while rain poured over the cemetery, soaking through my black suit and running down my face as the priest placed his hand on the polished wood and spoke words no husband should ever have to hear. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Before that moment, I was a husband planning a future with the woman I loved. After it, I was a man trying to understand how to keep living in a world where the person who made it meaningful no longer existed. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, stood beside me in a small black dress, her eyes never leaving the coffin, as if she were waiting for someone to say this was all a mistake, and her mother would suddenly appear, smiling, apologizing for frightening everyone. Adults know some goodbyes are permanent. Children believe the people they love are supposed to come back. When the workers began lowering the coffin, Lily pulled my hand. "Daddy, is Mummy cold inside there?" That question broke something in me. I was supposed to be the one who comforted her, who explained the impossible, who made her feel safe. But I felt lost, not strong. I wanted to tell her that her mother was somewhere beautiful, that love was stronger than death, the perfect answer that would make everything hurt less. I couldn't find one. So I knelt in the wet ground, pulled my daughter into my arms, and said the only thing I could manage. "No, sweetheart, Mummy can't feel cold anymore." She rested her head against my chest. "Will she come home?" I closed my eyes. That was the question I'd been asking myself since the day I got the news. Will I hear her footsteps again? Her laugh from the kitchen? Will I wake and find this was all some nightmare? But some dreams end, and some people never come back. So I held my daughter and told her the only promise I could make. Mummy will always be with us. Before Elena became the woman I buried, she was the woman who made ordinary life feel extraordinary. Elena Carter had a gift I never fully appreciated until I lost her. She could take the simplest moments and turn them into memories. She never needed expensive restaurants or vacations. She was happiest on our small balcony in the evening, drinking tea while Lily played nearby, talking about the little things most people ignore. She used to say people spend so much time waiting for happiness to arrive that they forget to notice it's already sitting beside them. "You sound like someone who reads too many inspirational quotes," I'd tease. She'd laugh. "No, Daniel, people realize the value of things when they're already gone." I never imagined how much those words would come back to haunt me. Elena left handwritten notes everywhere, inside my work bag, beside my coffee cup, tucked into jacket pockets. Some were reminders, "Don't forget your keys." Some were playful, "Try not to argue with people who are wrong. I know this is difficult for you." And some were simply love, waiting to be found. "Come home safely, someone here loves you." One morning I found one in my laptop bag. "Remember your family is waiting for you. Work is important, but we are more important." That evening I asked her, only half joking, whether she secretly followed me around to plant these things. "Because somehow you always know exactly when I need one," I said. "Maybe I know you better than you know yourself." That's probably true. She leaned closer. It's definitely true. And she was right. Elena knew me, sometimes better than I knew myself. Our daughter was the center of our world. Elena's kindness, my stubbornness, though Elena always insisted the stubbornness was entirely mine. One Saturday, Lily refused her breakfast. "You liked eggs yesterday," Elena said. "Yesterday was different," Lily said, and I laughed and told Elena she'd passed that particular talent down. Elena looked between the two of us, mock offended, asking if we'd teamed up against her. We had. She laughed anyway. Those moments seemed small then. Losing Elena taught me that the ordinary ones are exactly the ones you'd give anything to have back. The night before Elena disappeared, I knew something was wrong. She barely touched her dinner, kept glancing at the window, checked the front door more than once. When I finally asked what was happening, she said only that she was tired. But when I pressed, she looked toward Lily, drawing across the room, and said, "Not here." 2 words that stayed with me, because Elena had never once been afraid to talk to me. Later, after Lily was asleep, I found her standing at our bedroom window in the dark, staring at the quiet street. I wrapped my arms around her. She leaned into me, but felt far away. "If something happened to me," she said, "would you take care of Lily?" I turned her to face me. "Why would you ask me that? Just answer me." "Of course I would. I promise." A tear slid down her face. "And promise me you'll always remind her she was loved." "Elena, you're frightening me." She pulled me into a hug instead of answering. "I love you, Daniel. No matter what happens, remember that." I held her tightly and told her I would. I didn't know then that it wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise she'd spend 3 years trying to keep. The morning she left, I woke early and found her at the mirror, getting ready for the trip. And for a while, I just watched her without saying anything. The way she brushed her hair, folded her clothes, paused now and then, as if her mind were somewhere far away. We never think mornings like that will become memories. We assume there will always be another one. I wish I'd known that was the last ordinary morning I would have with her. I would have held her longer, told her I loved her more times, paid attention to every small detail, because it's the small things you miss most once someone is gone. Elena worked as a senior financial manager at Kessler Maritime Group. She loved the job because she believed honesty mattered. "Numbers tell stories, Daniel," she used to say. "If you know where to look, they'll tell you when someone is lying." I always joked she was the only person I knew who could make accounting sound thrilling. I didn't yet know how much those words would matter, or that Elena was about to uncover a truth someone powerful wanted buried. Before she left, Lily ran to her holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. "You forgot to say goodbye properly," she announced, and held up her little finger, their ritual, the promise way. Elena linked her finger with Lily's. "I promise I'll come back soon." "With my surprise?" "With your surprise. And it has to be pink." Elena laughed and hugged her daughter, a hug that lasted longer than usual. I thought she was simply being a loving mother. I didn't know she was trying to memorize the feeling of holding her child. At the door, she turned and looked at the two of us. No music, no warning. Just a woman looking at the people she loved most. "Why are you looking at us like we're the ones leaving?" I joked. "I'm just lucky," she said. 2 days, I said. 2 days, she agreed. "I'll call when I arrive." "Don't work too much." "You say that like you know me." "I married you. Unfortunately, I know everything." She laughed, that laugh I'd spent 3 years missing. I opened the door for her. "Come home safely." Her smile faded just slightly. "I'll try." Then she walked away, and I watched her car disappear down the street, with no idea it was the last time I'd see my wife leave our home as the woman I knew. The first day without her felt strange but ordinary. I expected her call, her complaints about the hotel or the food, the small grumbling that was so entirely Elena. By evening there was nothing. The next day, nothing. I called. It rang and rang, then voicemail. I told myself people get busy, phones die, meetings run long. There's always a reasonable explanation. Until someone knocked on the door and I knew before I opened it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was their faces. A man from Elena's company. Uncomfortable. Afraid. "Mr. Carter? My name is James Miller. I work with Kessler Maritime Group. Where is Elena?" He looked down, and that told me everything before he said a word. There was an accident. The vehicle she was traveling in. She didn't survive. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember how long I stayed there. I only remember glancing down the hallway where Lily was laughing at something, living inside an ordinary moment while my entire world collapsed a few feet away. Telling her was worse than the funeral. People assume the funeral is the hardest part. It isn't. The hardest part is looking into the eyes of a child who trusts you completely and telling her the person she loves most isn't coming home. "When is Mummy coming back?" she asked that night. And I couldn't answer, not right away. She noticed. Children notice. Everything. "Mummy had an accident," I finally said. "The kind where she can't come home." "No," her voice rose. "Call her, Daddy. Tell her to come home." That was the moment I broke completely, because I wanted exactly what she was asking for. To pick up the phone and hear Elena ask why everyone was crying. But the phone never rang. The funeral passed like something half remembered. The flowers, the prayers, people telling me to be strong. Nobody warns you about what comes after everyone else goes home. The empty chair, reaching for your phone to send a message before remembering there's no one to send it to. Your daughter leaving her bedroom door open because some part of her still hopes her mother will walk through it. 3 years passed. 3 birthdays, 3 Christmas mornings, 3 years of Lily growing older around a question she was too afraid to ask aloud. I tried to give her a happy life, tried to be both parents at once, but there were moments I knew I never could be. A daughter needs her father. She also needs her mother. Then came the Saturday that changed everything. I took Lily to Port Everly because she loved watching the cruise ships. The sun was bright, families were out walking, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relaxed. Lily stood beside me, admiring a ship preparing to leave the harbor. "Can we go on one someday? Promise?" I lifted my little finger. "Promise." She linked hers with mine, and for a moment, I forgot about grief entirely. A few moments later, I looked back toward the ship, and I saw the red scarf. A woman stood near the boarding gate with her back to me, a red scarf around her neck exactly like the one Elena wore on our first trip together. The one I'd teased her about looking like a bank robber, and she'd said maybe I should be careful because she might steal my heart too. Then the woman turned, and every sound around me seemed to disappear because I knew that face. I knew that smile. It was Elena, the woman I'd buried 3 years earlier, standing alive less than 100 meters away. For a few seconds, I forgot how to breathe. I'd spent 3 years teaching myself to accept something my heart never wanted to accept. And hope can be its own kind of suffering once you've already lost someone. My mind tried to protect me by refusing what my eyes were showing me, People don't return 3 years later at a cruise terminal. Maybe grief had finally caught up with me. Maybe it was someone who simply looked like her. But she adjusted the scarf the exact way she always did when nervous. She brushed a strand of hair back the way she always did. She looked at the ship with that same thoughtful, faraway expression I'd seen 1,000 times. And I knew, before she even turned fully toward me, that it was her. Elena. Her name left me like a prayer, not a shout. Lily looked up. "Daddy?" I couldn't take my eyes off the woman at the gate. The crowd moved around us, families hugging goodbye, children running past with bags and toys, the world carrying on as if mine hadn't just stopped. Elena turned fully. Our eyes met. I watched shock cross her face, then disbelief, then something that looked like pain. I wanted to run to her, hold her, ask 1,000 questions. But more than anything, I wanted to know why. Why let me believe she was dead? Why let our daughter grow up without her? Why come back only to look at me like she was about to vanish again? Before I could reach her, the man beside her noticed me. Tall, gray jacket, calm in a way that didn't match a stranger's surprise. He leaned toward her and murmured something I couldn't hear, and I watched her expression change. Shock gave way to fear. She looked at me again, and that hurt more than anything, because I didn't see someone who wanted to run from me. I saw someone who wanted to come home and couldn't. "Elena, wait!" My voice was louder now. Heads turned. She stopped, then shook her head, just slightly. "Not here. Not now." And she turned toward the ship. I ran after her. A security officer stepped into my path. "That woman is my wife," I said. "My wife died 3 years ago." People stared. I didn't care. "Elena!" She stopped and turned one last time. Our eyes met, and then she raised 2 fingers to her lips. My heart stopped, because I knew that gesture. Early in our marriage, whenever one of us traveled, we touched 2 fingers to our lips and pressed them over our heart. "My love goes with you wherever you go." She'd done it at airports, outside our house, every time we ever separated. And now, after 3 years, she did it again, eyes filling with tears, before she disappeared inside the ship. The horn sounded. The ship slowly pulled from the dock. I stood frozen. Lily took my hand. "Daddy, was that Mummy?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. How do you explain the impossible to a child? That the mother she'd cried for every night was alive and had just walked away? "Yes," I finally whispered. "Mummy is alive?" I watched the ship shrink into the distance. I don't know, but I knew one thing for certain. That was Elena, and I was going to find out why she'd left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, holding an old note of hers. "No matter what happens, find your way back to me." For 3 years, I'd thought those words meant I had to accept losing her. Now I wondered if she'd been trying to tell me something else entirely, that one day we'd need to find our way back to each other. I called my sister Rachel first. She knew something was wrong the moment she picked up. "I saw Elena," I said. Silence then. "Daniel, what are you saying?" "I'm saying my wife is alive. I saw her at the harbor. Lily saw her too." I told my sister everything. The ship, the scarf, the man beside her, the way she'd looked at me before walking away. When I finished, Rachel said something I didn't expect. "If Elena's alive, there's a reason. Find it before you decide how to feel." She was right. Before I could forgive Elena, before I could be angry with her, I needed the truth. The next morning, I found the ship's name, the Celestine, and its route. It was due at a private island 2 days later. I had no idea what I'd find there, whether the truth would bring us back together or finish what was left of us. I only knew I couldn't live with the questions any longer. I found the man from the ship in a small cafe near the harbor, not far from where I'd seen Elena. He didn't look up right away, and when he did, his hands were unsteady around his coffee cup. "You're Daniel Carter. How do you know my name?" He didn't answer that at first. "I need you to hear all of it before you decide to hate me," he said. "Because you will, and you'd be right to." "Who are you?" "My name is Michael Reed." He swallowed. "I was the one driving the car that night." For a moment I didn't understand. Then I did, and my hands closed into fists under the table. "You killed her." "I was supposed to." His voice cracked. "Victor Hale paid me to make sure Elena Carter didn't survive that drive. I've spent 3 years wishing I could tell you I refused. I didn't refuse. I did the job. I ran her off that road exactly like I was told to." "Then how is she alive?" "Because when I got to the wreck to confirm it, she was still breathing, and I couldn't finish it." He looked at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "I told Victor it was done. Then I pulled her out, and I never went back." "Why didn't you go to the police? 3 years, Michael. You could have ended this 3 years ago." He shook his head slowly. "You don't understand what Victor is. He doesn't just have money. He has men everywhere, in places you wouldn't think to look. Ports, precincts. Half the people who could have protected me were people he'd already bought." He shifted his weight, and I noticed for the first time the way he favored one leg. "And I have a way of walking, a limp from an old injury. My height, my build. Victor's men had seen me enough times to know exactly what to look for, even in a disguise. A beard doesn't change how a man drags his leg on wet pavement. I couldn't risk being made from 50 feet away by someone just glancing at me walk by. So we stayed as far from anything connected to Victor as we could, and I told myself one day the right kind of help would find us instead. "Where is she?" I asked. "Nearby." Michael studied me. "I need you to prepare yourself. The woman you're about to see has spent 3 years believing she'd never be allowed to come home." Before he opened the door, he added one more thing. Elena's greatest fear, more than anything else, was that I would hate her. Even after everything, that thought broke something in me all over again. Then he opened the door, and there she was, standing by the window, smaller somehow. Not in body, but in the way 3 years can wear a person down. Her eyes were unchanged, the eyes that always found mine across a crowded room. "Daniel." I crossed the room before I could think and pulled her into my arms before either of us said a word. She felt smaller than I remembered, and real in a way memories never are. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then, into her hair, I finally said it. "You're alive." My voice cracked on the second word. 3 years of grief, and that was all I could manage to say. She held on to me like she was afraid I'd disappear too. "Yes." I don't know what to say. I know. "I buried you, Elena. I watched Lily cry for you. I had to tell my daughter her mother was never coming home." Her face broke with every sentence, but she didn't defend herself. She only absorbed it, carrying the same grief I was. "I wanted to come home," she said at last. "I need you to believe that." "Then why didn't you?" "Because of Victor Hale." The name meant nothing to me yet. Over the next hour, she told me everything. Before she disappeared, Elena had been reviewing financial records at Kessler Maritime Group. What looked at first like ordinary accounting errors turned out to be something else entirely. Millions of dollars moving through fake contracts and false accounts, all of it controlled by one of the company's most powerful executives, Victor Hale. He wasn't just stealing money, she said. He was covering it up. I thought he'd panic when I confronted him. He smiled instead. She repeated what he'd told her, that people who believe in doing the right thing are usually the easiest to destroy. He threatened you. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you, she said. You'd have confronted him, investigated, tried to fix everything, and Victor knew that too. The man who pulled you out of that car, I said. Michael. He told me he was the one Victor sent. Elena nodded slowly. He was supposed to leave me there. He didn't. And the moment he chose to save me instead of finishing the job, Victor would have killed him too if he'd ever found out. So we both disappeared. Neither of us had a choice, once he made his. Why didn't you contact me secretly? I asked. Because Victor had people watching. Investigators found photographs of you, of Lily, of our house. My stomach turned cold. That was when I knew I couldn't come home, she said. I could survive missing you. I couldn't survive knowing my return put you and Lily in danger. For the first time since seeing her again, I stopped thinking only of my own pain and started seeing hers. 3 years of missed birthdays, a first day of school she never saw, every ordinary moment a mother is supposed to have. I had spent 3 years believing Elena had abandoned us. She had spent 3 years sacrificing herself so we'd be safe. How did you live? I asked. 3 years, no name you could use, nowhere safe to go. She managed a small, tired smile. Michael found work on a small, private line. Cargo and short cruises, the kind of place that pays cash and doesn't ask many questions. He'd worked around ports his whole life before that night, so it wasn't hard for him to disappear into it under another name. And I found something to do with my hands. She told me about the long, empty stretches of those years, how the hardest part wasn't the fear, but the boredom of missing us with nothing to do about it. Her grandmother had taught her to knit and sew when she was a girl, and somewhere in that first lonely year, she picked the habit back up. A sweater at first, then another, then small, soft-bodied teddy bears with button eyes, bedspreads stitched from mismatched fabric picked up wherever the ship stopped. She made one of everything for Lily first, then more, as if she could store up 3 years of birthdays and Christmases in yarn and thread. By the end, there were dozens. Michael was the one who suggested I sell some, she said. He'd lay them out on a table near the dock when tourists came through, talk me up to passengers, argue prices when I was too embarrassed to ask what the work was worth. Between his wages and my sewing, it was enough to live quietly on. She looked down at her hands. It wasn't a life, but it was something to hold on to some days when I couldn't hold either of you. I took her hand. I thought you left me. I thought maybe I wasn't enough. Daniel, but I understand now. You were trying to come home. That was when she finally broke, not the quiet, private tears of 3 years alone, but the release of someone who no longer had to be strong by herself. I held her, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt like I'd found my wife again. But Victor Hale was still out there, believing he'd won. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about him walking free while Elena had spent 3 years in hiding. Michael's confession was enough to break my heart, but it wasn't enough to end this on its own, not without someone who could actually make it stick. I called Ethan Voss. We'd grown up 2 houses apart, and while I'd built a life around Elena and Lily, Ethan had built a career chasing corporate fraud, eventually landing as head of a financial crimes task force. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. He picked up on the second ring. "Daniel, it's late." "Ethan, I need your help. It's about Elena." "Elena's been gone 3 years, Daniel. She's alive." Silence on the line. Then, "Start from the beginning." I told him everything. Kessler Maritime Group, Victor Hale, the accident that wasn't an accident, the man who was paid to make sure she didn't survive it and couldn't go through with it. The 3 years Elena had spent hiding to keep us safe. When I finished, Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "If even half of this is provable, we can end him," he said. "But I need whoever's willing to talk, and I need it fast. A driver with first-hand knowledge of the order to kill her. That's not just a fraud case anymore. That's attempted murder with a paper trail leading straight to Victor." Michael wasn't ready. When Ethan's people first approached him, he refused outright. Surfacing meant risking everything he'd spent 3 years hiding from. And 3 years of fear doesn't undo itself in a day. He was still saying no the morning I brought Elena to meet him at the harbor office where Ethan's team had set up. Then he saw us. Elena walked in and I pulled her into my arms without thinking, and she was crying into my shoulder. And I was crying too, right there in front of everyone. I didn't notice Michael at first. When I looked up, he turned toward the window, jaw tight, blinking hard. "Michael?" Elena said gently. 3 years, he said, not looking at us. 3 years telling myself I was doing the right thing by staying quiet, staying hidden, waiting for someone else to be brave enough to end this. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed by his own tears. "Watching the two of you like that, I don't want to be the reason it takes a day longer for people like you." He turned to Ethan. "I'll testify, whatever you need." The next morning, Ethan's team began building the case in earnest. Michael's account of the night of the crash, Elena's financial records, and the paper trail Ethan's investigators could now pull with real authority behind them. 2 weeks later, Kessler Maritime Group was holding its annual general meeting, where Victor was expected to be named chairman. "He thinks he's about to be rewarded," Ethan told me. "That's where we end this." "Are you sure?" I asked Elena. She looked at Lily's photograph on the table for a long moment. "For 3 years I hid because I was afraid," she said finally. "I don't want my daughter growing up believing fear controlled her mother. I'm done hiding." "Then we do this together. Together." Victor Hale walked into the biggest meeting of his life, believing it would be his greatest victory. He had no idea the woman he tried to erase was about to walk through those doors, alive, or that the man he trusted to make sure of her silence forever was about to walk in right behind her. The ballroom was full of everything Victor cared about: power, reputation, influence. Executives at the long table, shareholders filling the seats, journalists waiting at the back for the announcement everyone expected. After years of climbing, he was about to be named the new chairman. To the room, he was a respected businessman who'd built an impressive career. None of them knew about the woman he'd tried to silence, or that the biggest secret of his life was about to walk through the door. The chairman began the meeting with warm words about leadership and dedication. The room applauded. Victor smiled. He'd always understood that appearances were everything, that people rarely look for darkness behind a polished image. That had always been his greatest strength. Until that day. "Before we continue the vote," the chairman said, There is one matter that requires attention. The doors at the back opened. Conversation slowly died as people turned to look. A woman many of them believed was dead walked calmly into the room, and every eye found her before anyone thought to look at the unremarkable, bearded stranger walking quietly beside her. Everyone noticed Elena first. A shareholder rose halfway out of his seat. Someone whispered that it couldn't be. A journalist's pen hit the floor. Nobody was more shaken than Victor. The confidence drained out of his face, the color out of his skin, as the one person he was certain would never return stood directly in front of him. "No," he whispered. "This is impossible." "You spent 3 years believing it was," Elena said. Her voice was calm, too calm, which made it worse. That was when Michael reached up. Underneath was a face Victor had once trusted enough to hand a loaded order to. The face of the man he'd paid to make sure Elena never came home. Victor's legs actually went, just for a second, his hand catching the table to hold himself up. Because it wasn't only that Elena had survived, it was that the man he'd sent to guarantee she didn't had been standing 3 feet away the entire meeting, and he hadn't recognized him at all. "You," Victor said, barely above a breath. "Me," Michael said quietly. "I did what you paid me to do, and then I couldn't live with it." The room dissolved into noise. "This is a setup," Victor said, looking around for support that wasn't coming. Ethan Voss stepped forward. "No, Mr. Hale, they're the reason you're standing here today." Behind them, the screens lit up with documents, financial records, transaction histories, a driver's testimony. Every hidden action, Victor believed, was gone for good. 3 years ago, Ethan told the board, Elena Carter discovered a network of fraudulent transactions moving company funds through false accounts. When she confronted Mr. Hale, he attempted to intimidate her into silence. When that failed, he paid a man to arrange an accident meant to make her disappear permanently. That man is standing in this room, and he has given a full account under oath. The room erupted. Board members turned toward Victor, who had no answer left to raise his voice with. For the first time, everyone in that room saw something in Elena besides fear. They saw strength. "Do you remember what you told me?" she asked him. "That people like me eventually become afraid." She looked around the room. "For a long time, I was. I had a husband who believed I was dead. A daughter who thought her mother was gone forever. I lost 3 years of my life because of you." Her voice caught, then steadied. "But fear didn't make me disappear. It made me stronger." Something shifted in Victor's face. Not quite regret, but the first crack in a man realizing everything he'd built was collapsing. "I never wanted this," he said quietly. "I was protecting the company." "No," Elena said. "You were protecting yourself. You built success, and you destroyed people to protect it. I didn't think you'd survive." "That was the problem, Victor. You thought my life was just another problem to remove." The doors opened again. Investigators moved in. "Victor Hale, you're under arrest for fraud, attempted murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." He didn't resist. As they cuffed him, he looked at Elena one last time. "I lost everything." "No," she said, softer now. "You lost what you built on lies." Michael testified in full in the weeks that followed. The payment, the instructions, the make of the car he'd been told to use. Messages he'd quietly kept without even knowing why at the time. Insurance enough against a day he never let himself imagine would come. Combined with Elena's financial records, it was no longer a case anyone could argue with. Victor Hale never became chairman of anything again. The cameras kept rolling as the man who'd seemed so powerful was led away, revealed, finally, as someone who'd destroyed a family out of fear of losing control. But for me, none of that was the real story. The real story was that after 3 years hiding, Elena was finally standing in the light again. Not a missing woman, not a victim, a wife, a mother, someone who had survived. Outside, she took my hand and asked if it felt strange being there. Everything about the last few weeks is strange, I said, and she laughed, softly, for the first time in longer than I could remember. But this, I told her, lifting our joined hands, feels normal. There was still one person waiting who mattered more than any of it. Lily. When Elena saw her daughter standing there, nothing about the arrest, the evidence, or the headlines meant anything anymore. This was the only victory that counted. A mother seeing her child again. A child seeing the mother she'd never truly stopped believing would come back. Lily stood holding the same stuffed rabbit Elena had bought her years before. For a moment, neither of them moved. Children don't see complicated situations the way adults do. They see love, and they recognize who belongs to them. Mummy? That single word undid Elena completely. She sank to her knees as Lily ran to her with everything a 10-year-old had in her, and Elena held her the way someone holds what they've been waiting 3 years to hold. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry." "I missed you," Lily said into her shoulder, and those 3 words were enough to break everyone watching. Because sometimes forgiveness is stronger than anger, and children love without keeping score. That evening, we sat together as a family for the first time in 3 years. It was strange and beautiful and painful all at once, because even with Elena home, the years we'd lost weren't coming back. There would always be birthdays she missed, school events she never saw, memories she wasn't part of. But we also had something rare, a second chance. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. I wish I could say Elena came home and everything simply became normal, but healing doesn't work that way. There were nights she woke from nightmares, moments Lily grew frightened her mother would vanish again. Nights I'd watch Elena sleeping beside me and quietly wonder if I was dreaming. Because once you've lost something, part of you is always braced to lose it again. One night I found her in the living room, holding an old photograph. The 3 of us, before everything changed. Couldn't sleep? No, I missed so much, Daniel. Lily's first day back at school, hearing her laugh every morning, watching her grow. Her voice softened further. And I missed you. We lost time, I said, but we still have time left. A tear slid down her cheek. I don't deserve how kind you're being to me. You spent 3 years believing you'd never see us again, and you sacrificed everything to protect us. You're allowed to feel guilty. Just don't confuse guilt with love. You loved us enough to walk away. You already proved that. Slowly, our family found a new rhythm. Elena went back to being the mother Lily had missed. Homework, school events, dinner, though her cooking hadn't improved in 3 years. When she served pancakes one evening, Lily took a single bite, looked at me, and asked whether we were sure her mother had fully recovered. "This tastes like a science experiment," she said, and I tried not to laugh while Elena crossed her arms and demanded to know whether I intended to defend her. "I believe honesty is important," I said. "Daddy is finally learning from Mummy," Lily announced, and we all laughed. A sound that had been missing from our house for 3 years, and now, finally, filled it again. One afternoon, Elena brought out the old trunk she'd carried home with her. The sweaters, the handmade teddy bears, the mismatched bedspread she'd stitched together over 3 years of missing us. Lily went through every piece slowly, holding each one like it might disappear if she moved too fast. "You made all of these? For me?" "Every stitch," Elena said. "Some nights that trunk was the only conversation I got to have with you. Lily has never worn half of it. She says she's saving it, though I think what she really means is she isn't ready to stop being able to reach into that trunk and find her mother's hands in every stitch." Months later, Lily asked her mother if she'd thought about her while she was gone. "Every single day, every hour." "Did you know I kept your picture beside my bed?" "I knew." "How?" "Mothers know things." "That's a little scary," Lily said, and I laughed from the doorway that her mother had always been mysterious. Lily agreed, and then added, quietly, that she liked having her back. A year after Elena came home, we finally kept the promise I'd made at the harbor the day I first saw her again. We went on a cruise, not to forget the past, but to build something new on top of it. The ocean that once carried Elena away became the place our family celebrated finding each other. On the deck, Lily held her mother's hand and asked if she remembered the last time Daddy saw her on a ship. "That was scary," she said solemnly, then began counting on her fingers everything that had been fixed since. Mummy came back, the bad man went to jail, their family was together, and Daddy had finally learned to make pancakes. We laughed until the last of the sunlight disappeared into the water, and I watched my wife and my daughter standing together, something I'd once believed I would never see again. I thought often, afterward, about the man I'd been 3 years earlier, kneeling beside a grave, certain his life was over. I wish I could tell him that sometimes life breaks your heart before it hands you something greater, that some endings aren't really endings, and that love doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it just goes dark for a while, fighting its way back. Even years later, Lily still asked her mother the same question most nights. "Will you still be here when I wake up?" And every night, Elena gave her the same answer. "Yes, my darling, I'll be right here." And now, finally, she always was. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share. Subscribe for more emotional stories. Thank you for watching.